Good evening. Anybody out there in Facebook land? This is a video that I am planning to do once a week after our challenge in the Business Mastery program. Just on things that people raise with me that come to my own attention. But there are a lot of ongoing issues that I think it's worth having a blab about. And if I'm in the mood once a week to do it, then why not? So, but from this week, next week, they're going to be on the Thrive by Design Facebook page, the work page. And I'll record and keep them there. But so if you're not if you haven't joined or liked that page, it's on the Facebook site, Thrive by Design, but we'll be running them from there in future. Hi, Catherine. How are you, lovey? And tonight I wanted to talk about women's pain and how women are generally treated by the medical profession. And I've been doing some research. It's been brought to my attention by a few people in my life, and I've certainly had my own issues with this over many, many years. That women do tend to get treated quite differently with their health issues than do men. Now, we do poorly under the patriarchy, we as women, we know this. It wasn't that long ago where women couldn't get a loan without some man's permission or buy a car or get a house. Not that long ago at all, really. It was certainly going on in my lifetime. And in my generation, the only education options available, literally, when I was in high school, were we were being streamed off to be a teacher or a typist or an office chick or a nurse, basically. They were the only options open. I, some time ago, went to a 30-year anniversary, and I was quite stunned at all the paraphernalia they had out from our year of that school and just how widely divergent education was in those days, streaming women in one direction and men in the other. Some things have improved, there's no doubt about it. But when it comes to health, that last hideous bastion of male supremacy, quite frankly, when it comes to women, there's not a lot that's changed. Women wait longer at emergency departments for pain relief than do men. These are research statistical figures. They wait longer to be diagnosed with cancer. They are more likely to have their physical symptoms ascribed to mental health issues. They are more likely to have their heart disease misdiagnosed or to become disabled after a stroke, and are more likely to suffer illnesses ignored or denied by the medical profession. Women in pain are much more likely than men to receive prescriptions for sedatives than for actual pain relief. Endometriosis sufferers, and we'll talk about this particular condition as we go on through this talk, but they're much more likely to be diagnosed with a mental health condition rather than a chronic pain condition. Women who receive coronary bypass surgery are only 50% likely to be given painkillers, prescribed painkillers, as men are, 50% less. Prescription for pain relief after a coronary bypass surgery. It's pretty mind-blowing when you think about it. Women are 7 times more likely to be misdiagnosed and discharged in the middle of having a heart attack than men are. Why? Because the medical concepts of most diseases are based on understanding of male physiology, and women have altogether different symptoms during a heart attack than men. But if you're not presenting with a male set of symptoms when your heart is giving out, you're 7 times more likely to be misdiagnosed and discharged and go home and die. From the beginning of medicine, in the concept that we know of it today, women's differences to men have always marked them as inferior. In ancient times, it was the womb, pretty obvious difference, that was thought to be the source of all ills and a corrupting influence on us women, our very basis of power. Plato, that wonderful genius in many things, he described the womb as a voracious animal, wandering the female body and sucking the life force from it. Cool. When the glory of modern medicine switched its focus to the nervous system, women's issues were blamed on her weak nerves. And once the endocrine system was discovered, it was our raging hormones to blame for our problems, along, of course, with our corrupted mental state that went with that. There have been many bizarre theories proposed to explain why women are lesser creatures and who need looking after by men, all written by men, I might add. But at the heart of most of them is the idea that women's reproductive processes, the blood rights of menses, pregnancy, breastfeeding, and cessation of menses, drain us of so much energy just doing all that, that actually paying any attention to anything else would make us mad and strip us of our ultimate goal, according to men, of being good wives and mothers, for fuck's sake. Oh, and the cures that were inflicted upon us, usually incredibly punitive, I might add, designed to put a difficult woman back in her box to become a good woman and a dutiful wife and mother, et al. Clitorises, a vastly superior organ to the penis, I might add, and that's another subject for a whole day, but they are vastly superior things, were cut off. Wombs and ovaries were removed willy-nilly. Women were forced fed. Restraint and rest, which the male medical profession felt we needed, were enforced by straitjackets and shackling, chemical douches, which were often hideously burning. We had leeches attached to the labia and the cervixes. There were bloodletting, hanging her upside down. The hell was the point of that? I don't know. And the odd killing, of course, in cases of suspected demonic possession. And that good old predictable staple of not knowing or caring what to do, get her pregnant. That was often prescribed for women with women issues. And don't get me started on what was done in the halls of Bedlam et al. To incur us of rebellion against our roles. None of this was ever tested or proven, of course, as women were never studied in any detail by medical science, and I use the term quite loosely. Women, in fact, were not even included in clinical trials until the 1990s. Let's let that one sink in. Not included in clinical trials until the 1990s. And while we make up 70% of chronic pain sufferers, 80% of pain medication has only ever been tested on men. Even in preclinical trials with cell lines and rodents, males have been chosen over females. This only began to change in 2016. 2016, my friends, 3 years ago. Researchers, by the way, justified this extraordinary level of bias by claiming that the estrous cycles are in female rats, and ergo the menstrual cycles in women, would potentially corrupt the results. Can you believe this shit? If that were true, don't you think it would be rather imperative to understand this before selling the bloody drugs to women? Insanity, true insanity. 8 out of 10 prescription drugs removed from the system in the years before the turn of the last century, not that long ago again, my loves, by the FDA were done so because of severe adverse effects that caused much greater health risks to women than to men. But it took until last year before a study of this reality worked out that it was the result of serious, and in parenthesis, as a result of serious male biases in basic preclinical and clinical research. Last year they finally figured that one out, for God's sake. And if this is known, then why are women still being treated as hysterical, over-emotional, anxious, and unreliable witnesses to their own health and well-being. Why do doctors, who don't have PhDs, by the way, and aren't, in fact, doctors, still treat patients who are female differently to men? I mean, it's extraordinary when you think about it. For most conditions that afflict women, early intervention means much better outcomes. But for endometriosis, for example, you know the average time it takes to get from the onset of symptoms to get an actual diagnosis? 12 fucking years. That's right, 12 years. From the time a woman starts experiencing the symptoms of that incredibly debilitating disease until the time they're actually afforded a diagnosis by the medical profession, the average time is 12 years. That's today. This is insane. This is utterly insane. Have you ever had a mammogram? I haven't. And I'll have a mammogram when the same male-dominated system comes up with a similar test for testicular cancer, where they squeeze very hard a male's balls between two cold plates of steel to have a gander at it, in the way they do with mammograms, which come up with a whole heap of false positives, by the way. Funny about that. Because the belief in women's inferiority is to the bone. Remember the roasting pan theory we talked about not so long ago, that when you're told something often enough for long enough, when the lie is repeated often enough that women are inferior, it gets ingrained into absolutely every concept and perspective of how people deal with us, and it just gets handed on generation after generation. Doctors are predominantly male. Researchers are predominantly male. And even the female ones are trained by males with this inherent bias that is generations old, and are working hard to follow the male-dominated rules in order to be acceptable in a male profession. Males do not know about women's health issues. They do not experience them, they do not feel them, and they predominantly could give a rat's ass about them. And this bias, well researched now, is not even taught to upcoming research students. They're not taught about it at all. So it just gets handed on. In the same way that the profound ignorance of the gut and its impact on all other kinds of health issues just gets handed on. Do you know that doctors, even though they aren't, in their many years of insane training, do not get taught a single word about nutrition or food and its effect on chronic conditions? Not a single word. And yet they're out there treating these chronic conditions. It's kind of mad. Now, there's a lovely meta-scientist called Jeffrey Mogul, who was once a pain researcher. And as a grad student in the 90s, he decided to run some data separately for male and female mice, and discovered the drug lab, as usual, was only working with the male mice. When he, astounded by this reality, reported this to his postdoctoral neuroscientist supervisor, he was told, "Jeff, sex differences are to enjoy, not to study." No, I'm not making that one up. That's what happens. Mogul found in 2005, in a review of research in the journal Pain, he found that 79% of pain studies involved on male animals only, and only 4% of those looked for actual sex differences. The seriously bizarre lack of curiosity about female illness is actually hidden in some ways by the great strides taken in breast cancer and obstetrics. And why are these leaping forward? Because they involve reproduction viability that are, of course, of interest to men. And I'm not decrying those advancements, which have no doubt saved countless lives. But we are more than reproductive machines to serve the male agenda of reproducing the line in his name. But that's where the strides in women's health have been made. Make sure she can breed effectively. Make sure the child is born viable and alive and it can be fed. But as for the rest of us, doesn't matter. Mogul went on to discover that there are actual differences in the sensory nerves that enter the spinal column. the spinal cords of men and women who experience neuropathic pain. They actually have different pathways. The first such study in humans, and I would have thought rather compelling evidence that we need different drugs for brave men and for emotional women. Yes, I'm being sarcastic. But that's the language they use. You know, if a man's in pain and dealing with it, the poor brave thing. If a woman's in pain and presenting with it, oh, she's being hysterical as usual. That's the bias that we live with still on a daily basis when women in chronic pain with chronic women's health issues attempt to get them taken seriously by the medical profession to this day. And even though, as I said, they've found that women and men have entirely different neural pathways, which means drugs will act on them differently, they're still testing them predominantly on male mice. And most of these studies are done on male animals. It's insane. It's utterly insane. Modern day pain management, anyway, let's face it, is notoriously dismal. With our go-to opioids and anti-inflammatories, which are basically fancy versions of what the old healers used for thousands of years, opium and willow bark. Very good for dealing with a broken bone and a raging toothache. No good at all for chronic ongoing pain. But that's what we are fed. Endometriosis. It is a chronic, progressive, gynecological condition currently considered incurable by Western medicine. It occurs when the material or the tissue that lines the womb swells every month in preparation for a fertilized egg to be carried through. It occurs when that material leaks outside of the womb and starts growing in other parts of the body. It can attach to the fallopian tubes, it can attach to the ovaries, it can attach to the bowel, the urethra, it can attach to the kidneys and in other places. Dear God, it's even been found in the lungs. Okay? And every month, when this tissue starts to swell in following the hormonal signals that it's time to get ready for a baby in case a fertilized egg arrives, it grows wherever else it's attached itself, putting incredible pressure on. And symptoms can include excruciating and throw you to the floor, debilitating pain in the pelvic area, as well as other parts of the body wherever it is attached, putting pressure on the nerves and the organs it is attached to. It produces heavy and persistent menstrual bleeding, as well as breakthrough bleeding. It causes pain during penetrative sex. It causes pain when you use your bladder or use your bowel movements. It causes nausea and vomiting. It causes severe headaches and crippling fatigue. And this can have a severe impact on the individual experiencing it, on the quality of their life, their productivity in the workplace, their relationships, their ability to manage their families, and other aspects of their physical and mental health. It is estimated that at least 15% of women of reproductive age have this condition, and that 70% of women with chronic pelvic pain have this condition. That is a lot of women in a lot of pain. Around 1 in 7 women have this, and it is around 1 in 3 women for those experiencing fertility problems. And it has grown exponentially since the 60s. And what happened then? The introduction of the contraceptive pill. Estrogen, the hormone that actually grows things. It is now the most commonly prescribed drug in the world. The intergenerational aspects of women having been on these out of nature hormonal cycles and what that does to their daughters who are born and then their daughters are actually quite fascinating. But there is, of course, bugger all research being done on this for the reasons that we've just outlined. What is really disturbing about this is what I was mentioning before, that from the time of the onset of symptoms, the actual diagnosis is disturbingly long. 12 years. for a condition that has such immense impact on the woman's quality of life. It takes the male-dominated medical profession, on average, 12 years to make a diagnosis on a condition that affects 1 in 7 women and 1 in 3 women in fertility issues. In terms of research, there is bugger all going on in terms of prevalence and the impact. There literally has not been enough research done, surprise, surprise, in real world community settings to establish this. We don't know how serious a problem it is. Most of the research we do know is done on people who are eventually clawing their way into a hospital with a knife between their teeth saying, you kill me or I will, you fix this or I will. You know, who cares? They're only neurotic women, aren't they? What does it matter? It's really quite diabolically debilitating, okay? I bet this, if we're affecting men, though, the entire defence budgets of every bloody country in the world would have been thrown into sorting out this agonising, debilitating condition if it affected 1 in 7 men. I don't think I'm particularly wrong about that. Hippocrates, the supposed father of modern medicine, and his staff were treating this condition 2,500 years ago, it was a lot rarer then, as an organic disorder. You know what it is. But during the mad religious Middle Ages, when people were being burned at the stake or drowned in duck ponds for not having a penis, basically, women in such pain were considered mad, immoral, attention-seeking, promiscuous, hysterical. The word hysterical comes from the Greek word for the womb, which is hyster, or just plain bad. We are all still affected by this insane bias to this very day. As I said, tell a lie often enough and it becomes the truth, no matter how outrageous it is. And the mad religious nutbag legislators are still at it. In America, not a single piece of legislation has been introduced to stop children being slaughtered willy-nilly by right-wing, right male children. But during the period from 2011 to 2015, in America, state legislators have enacted 288 abortion restriction legislations. Just let that sink in. Not one to stop people killing children with guns, but 288 to control how women will utilise their own reproductive bodies. And it's got much worse since. If you want to really entertain yourself and horrify yourself, look up the new Georgia and some other of the Midwestern states' new laws on abortion, where you will be sent to jail for 90 years if you attempt to procure one. And even if you leave the state and go and have one and then come back, you'll go to jail for 90 years as well. It's insane. And here in Australia, right now, the religious happy-clappy nutbags of the Conservative parties are still today in New South Wales trying to prevent abortion from becoming decriminalised in 2021, for fuck's sake. And at the same time, and this one really gets my goat, when you do have a diagnosis and your reproductive system is entirely obliterated, it is almost impossible to get a legitimate hysterectomy in this mad bastion of white male supremacy under the age of 40 because some man might yet want to breed with you. No, I'm not kidding. The stonewalling and bullshit that goes on for women who have clearly diagnosed irretrievable reproductive issues due to these ongoing issues and simply want the pain to stop and get some quality of life back, even when they've got a child or two, can't get the bloody help they need, which is just to remove the source of all of it, when they do want it. And once they are finally diagnosed after the average 12 years, they just keep getting stonewalled and offered the same old bullshit even when it doesn't work until they reach that magic marker of 40. When your reproductive system and availability for someone to breed with reaches an end. It's an obscenity. I'm speaking from personal experience with this one. Many years ago, I had the same issue, and it occurred with me after having 3 children And I went back on a contraceptive pill, and within 2 months, I was in absolutely diabolical pain. And I went and saw several doctors and many doctors and a gynecologist or two here or there, all male, of course. And basically they said, no, you can't have endometriosis or anything, because I've been doing a bit of my own research and this thing kept popping up. No, you can't have that. You've got kids. People with children don't get it. And so this went on, and I was in absolute bloody agony to do anything. On anyone who's got this condition, you have my sincere sympathies, ladies. It is a debilitating, diabolical, painful, hideous thing that can take days out of your life every month, weeks out of your life every month. And it wasn't until I had a tubal ligation done many years later. So I dealt with this and I put up with this and was fobbed off with this for about the 10 years, basically. And then at some point I decided I didn't want to do, and I'd tried IUDs and anyway, the whole bloody nightmare of reproduction and contraception. And so I eventually went and had a tubal ligation done. And when I had this done, guess what? They found buckets of it. That was the gynecologist expression. There's buckets of it everywhere. And anyway, I'm coming out of my anaesthetic, propped up in bed, feeling all the usual horrors with that. And this creature who'd been fobbing me off for years came in and said, oh, well, when we opened you up, yeah, we found buckets of that stuff, And I'm just looking at him blankly at this stage. And he said, and I kid you not, well, it's good to know it wasn't all in your mind then, wasn't it? Fuck me Friday, ladies. I reached for the water jug and I had such a look on my face, and he knew it. But before I reached the water jug, I simply said, fuck off out of my room, get out. And I never saw him again, but I went and saw someone else and they said, oh, we can give you testosterone or a hysterectomy. And I wasn't interested in either of those at the time. And it wasn't again until some years later when I discovered the wonders of Chinese medicine. Oh, thank God for Chinese medicine. And within a very short period of cycles, 2 or 3 cycles, on Chinese herbs and acupuncture, the symptoms of the condition resolved. And I stayed on those Chinese herbs and I got regular acupuncture and I was symptom free until such time as I did have a hysterectomy for another reason, again, handled incompetently by the Western medical male approach. But that, of course, meant that I no longer had any of these symptoms at all after that, because they took everything, even though I asked them not to take everything, leave me one ovary, but no. Anyway, story for another day. So if you have and are experiencing this condition, demand your rights. Seriously, do not let yourself get fobbed off here. It's terrible what they do to women with this condition that affects 1 in 7 women. Okay, you'll be fobbed off. You'll be treated with the same bias that they've treated women forever when it comes to women's health issues. Demand and keep demanding. If you can't help me, I need to see your supervisor. I need to see somebody. I want this resolved. Do the research, get the facts on endometriosis and take them and hand them over. I want this sorted. And if you've had a kid or two and you've decided that's all you want, even if you haven't had any and you're in so much pain and your reproductive system's blasted out of the water anyway, demand your right for permanent release from this if that is your choice, and don't take no for an answer. Someone very close to me that I love very dearly is going through this right now, where she simply can't get taken seriously because she's too young to have a hysterectomy, and they just keep fobbing her off with the same old drugs that don't work, and she remains in chronic pain, although now she is getting some acupuncture and Chinese herbs. So know your rights, ladies. Understand the prejudice you're dealing with when it comes to working with the male-dominated medical profession. They don't experience it, they don't know it, they don't particularly care, and there is intergenerational bias that we're all neurotic nutbags anyway, and we're just making it up as we go along. We are not. And anyone who's experienced this or has a family member who's experienced this is very aware that it is not made up. It is worse than childbirth. I don't care what anyone says, because it doesn't go away and it just keeps coming back. So that's my little rant for this evening about, the appalling reality that we as women deal with still to this day when it comes to women's health issues. And arm yourselves, have the knowledge, and go out there and demand that you be treated effectively. There, you know, and often this stuff starts in adolescence. And if it starts in adolescence, they're fobbed off even more so. They're considered, you know, neurotic teenagers, and, you know, it'll sort itself out over time, blah, blah, blah. No, it bloody won't. There are effective treatments for this, and you can get them. And if you're getting fobbed off by the medical profession, go and see your Chinese herbalist or acupuncturist. You know, I mean, I personally am in love with the people at Deep Water Medicine at Wollonga, and it was Les there that actually got me started on resolving all this many, 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 many years ago. So keep looking. And if you are being fobbed off and told that you can't have what has reached a climax and that you need, you know, go and start involving your local MP. And start talking to journalists and various other people, and just don't be fobbed off anymore. And don't endure it. The problem is, because we bought that message that we're neurotic or not good enough, or that we have to soldier on, women will endure this stuff silently for years. You know, they won't take a day off. They're dropping to their knees in pain in the office at work, but, oh, I've got to get this done before I can go. And they don't like to talk about it with other women because they think they're weak, because that's the story they've been told their whole lives. It's all in your head. You're making it up. You're just making a fuss about nothing. Don't do that. Women, we need to support each other in this one. We really do. Fathers, we need to support our daughters. Husbands, you need to support your wives. Seriously, this is a very real, chronic, debilitating condition, and women need to stop suffering in silence. It's time to get active, get angry, and demand effective relief or treatment. And that's not a bunch of opioid drugs or anti-inflammatories, okay? Get real treatment. All right, lovies, enough of a rant now. So if you are dealing with any of this, please get the appropriate help and don't stop. And get people in to help support you through it. And women, we all need to support each other with this. There's a terrible cone of silence around this. It's the same cone of silence that exists around the whole period issue, period. You know, God, we've got a long way to go before we start doing what's appropriate when children develop menses, which is celebrated as a great achievement and welcome to a magical part of their life, instead of giving them a bag full of stuff and poking them into the bedroom door and giving them a book to read. Celebrate it. Why should we not talk about these things? It's a huge part of our lives. And quite frankly, I'm tired of women being kept in the dark and treated like mushrooms. So, my darlings, I'll finish here. And thank you for listening to me this night. And I think next week I'm going to talk about aging and death, and how we also hide that in the way that we do in the West. But if there's anything else you'd like me to bang on about, oh, please feel free to suggest something. I'm happy to indulge. So have a great rest of the weekend. Enjoy this gorgeous, weird, warm weather that's come from the split in the polar vortex over Antarctica. My sense is the cold will be back before it's over. But it's beautiful to have it here. So have a great day tomorrow, and I'll look forward to seeing you next time. Bye.